Welcome everyone again to, yes, new name, same old podcast, same old Heartbreak here. Once again, this time, man, I appreciate you guys, man. Welcome again. This is the perfect podcast, as we all know. The perfect podcast. This is your lovely host, Heartbreak, always and forever, good looking, all that good stuff. Man, it is hot as hell today. I'm in this hot room. I have the AC on right now, but I'll probably turn it off in a little bit because, I don't want that noise in the background the whole time while I'm doing this. But, man, you guys, the draft came and went. The WWE 2016 draft, the first one we've seen in WWE in 5 years, came and went. And I guess for what it's worth, it was a pretty good draft. But, obviously, I feel like a lot of people are disappointed. I'm a little bit disappointed, but not for the same reasons other people are. And I'll get into that shortly. But one thing that I do want to say is that your boy, Heartbreak, actually went to the show. So I was there live and in person. Unfortunately, that gave me a little bit more work to do because I had to not only enjoy it live, but if you've ever been to a WWE show live, it's all about emotion. You can't really have a journalistic take on things when you're there live. You're more just enjoying the moment of it, and I'm happy I did that. I'm not regretting that at all. I'm just saying, it made me have to go back now and watch the shows over again and have a review of them journalistically, because I was trying while I was at the show, but it was just enjoyable. So my take on it was probably a little bit different than everyone else's. So that's why I had to realize that I should probably watch the show like every other person to get a proper journalistic view of it. And that's what I did. And my thoughts on it didn't change too much. I was still, most of the things that I thought when I was at the show is what I think now. And I have a pretty interesting take on this draft. It's different from other people you've probably heard. So I implore you to stick around for as long as you can and listen to the perfect podcast.
Raw is looking good right now. How does it feel to be a part of that?
Renee, there's a lot of emotions going through my mind right now. The last 7 months haven't been the greatest since I lost the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Obviously, in there was a bright spark, beating a New Day at Mania. But I just haven't been anywhere happy where I want to be. It's been a bit of a struggle mentally and emotionally for me. But with the brand split now and Raw, its own entity again, I'm ready to get back to where I was in 2010, 2009, 2010 when it became one of the fastest ever WWE World Heavyweight Championships. I'm through joking around. I'm through having comrades. I'm through taking the easy route. On my day, I can beat anybody. I'm better than any WWE superstar in the entire WWE. I need to get to where I should be, and that is WWE World Heavyweight Champion.
Well, that being said, I was going to say, who do you think it is?
And that was Sheamus, the Celtic Warrior. Sheamus. There was a lot of animosity, I can say, from watching the Draft Center show that they had on the WWE Network that lasted about 3 hours. It lasted the length of the show, and then it lasted an hour later to reveal the picks that couldn't make the show because, obviously it's a draft, so it's going to go pretty long. But Sheamus was one of many people who were either irritated or, very, very, very looking forward to having an opportunity to prove himself as these months go on, as this brand split continues. And it was interesting because, if we want to get into the actual, the picks, pick by pick and things like that, obviously Raw is a 3-hour show, Smackdown is a 2-hour show. These rules weren't really set forth to us before the show started, and they kind of told us the rules when the show first began. So people didn't really know what to think of it until the show actually started. Myself, when we got to the place, it had just started. So I had missed the pre-show stuff. It started at 7. at the place, and we didn't get there until 8, and I was a little bit disappointed about that. But we got there right when the televised show started. So when we walked into the building, I could hear Daniel Bryan's music, and me and my brother, we ran to our seats as fast as we could so that we could get a front row to the beginning. And it's good we did, because the beginning, they started the draft right at the beginning. Raw is a 3-hour show, SmackDown is 2, so Raw got 3 picks for every 2 picks SmackDown got, which seemed fair. If I had to think about it, Raw had 2 picks in a row. Obviously, they were separated by the rounds and stuff, but I would have gave SmackDown the first pick just because, they're already at a disadvantage by having to pick after Raw every round. So, they could have did SmackDown, Raw, SmackDown, and then had Raw have 2 picks, and then going into the next round, SmackDown starts it again, just to give them a slight advantage, because they were playing from behind the whole time. And watching an interview with Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon after the whole draft was over, they were saying themselves that they were playing from behind after the Raw's second pick. The first pick Raw had was Seth Rollins, which is all right, I guess. Seth Rollins isn't the biggest draw, so to be the number 1 pick to me is a little bit you're pushing yourself there a little bit. I understand in storyline, they have to have Seth be the number 1 pick because that's what Stephanie was pushing for the last couple weeks. But as far as, the competition between the brother and sister, Shane and Stephanie, I don't think that's a work. I don't think that that's something that is, storyline. I think that is as true as it can be. I think it's as big of a shoot as it can possibly be. When Vince came out a couple weeks ago and talked about how he wanted them to fight each other and to compete with each other to the point where if they break the law, it doesn't matter as long as they don't get caught. I think he was dead serious about that. I think that competition is something that has been missing from the product since the Monday Night Wars, like true competition. Actually, that's not true. Not the Monday Night Wars. I'll go with the post Monday Night Wars Ruthless Aggression era SmackDown and Raw, because that was the point where SmackDown was kicking Raw's ass. Triple H was the big old burial champion, and he didn't put anybody over. And Raw was very boring for a couple years. And SmackDown had the SmackDown 6, and they were just tearing it up every week. Every week they were tearing it up. And if you go back and you watch some of those SmackDowns from back in 2004, 2003, 2004, 2005-ish range, they were unbelievable compared to Raw. And a lot of that goes to a guy that people don't even know, Paul Heyman. He was the head writer of SmackDown. Him and Stephanie actually were the head writers of SmackDown back then. So a lot of the credit goes to them. Paul Heyman's a genius as far as the WWE business goes. So you can't really be too surprised to hear that he was the big head honcho pulling the strings backstage at SmackDown with that stuff. But so since that time, and then if you want to go a little bit further back, obviously the Monday Night Wars with WCW and WWF, that's really when the competition was high, and competition brings passion, and it brings motivation for people to push themselves to places where they couldn't have been before. I feel like guys like Mick Foley, guys like Triple H, guys like let's say Goldberg, those guys, like maybe not Goldberg, but like DDP, Crow Sting, I feel like those guys, they wouldn't have the careers that they had, the great careers that they had in those respective companies if it wasn't for the Monday Night Wars, and if it wasn't for the competition pushing them to do things that they probably normally wouldn't do under normal circumstances. That King of the Ring 1998 match between Undertaker and Mankind is absolutely unnecessary. It's a match that you would never see. You will never, ever see again. You know why you'll never see it again? Because you don't need to. It's not something that they need to have. Back in the day, they had to have a match like that, or a match that pushed the envelope. Obviously, they pushed it a little bit too far. They didn't, a lot of the people involved with that match didn't know everything that was going to go down. A lot of the stuff in there was accidents. But at the same time, it was a match that helped turn the tides into WWE's favor during the Monday Night Wars. And an example, Mick Foley had talked about, I can't remember where I heard it from. It was a podcast he might have been doing or something like that. And he had mentioned that after that match, he had heard from a guy from WCW, an executive named Kevin Sullivan, had said that the war was over, that WWE had won, because there was nothing WCW could do that could top the match that Mankind and Undertaker had, because nobody is crazy enough to do what Mankind did in that match. Jumping off the tape, getting chokeslammed through the Hell in the Cell, getting thrown off the Hell in the Cell, getting tombstoned on a bunch of thumbtacks. Like, the guy's crazy, but it helped propel his career to the point where it's legendary status. He's a Hall of Famer now. So, that kind of stuff would never have happened if it wasn't for someone running behind their backs 24/7, constantly having the worry of being put out of business and losing a job potentially. So that is something that Vince, I feel like, legitimately wants. So that part of it is the shoot. As far as WWE is concerned, I feel like they're as competitive and it's as real as it can be. But I don't know what the fallout will be as far as like the consequences of being the loser. But I don't think anybody knows that, and I think that's just another thing that we're going to be looking forward to seeing in the future after this whole thing is said and done. But getting back to the draft, I feel like some of these picks did have a work-related reason why they were made, but I feel like most of them were shoot. And I feel like, like in a real draft in any professional sport, there were times that they had to make picks on the fly and they had to consult with each other and blah, blah, blah to realize what they wanted to build out of their brand. And a lot of that, I feel like, is a testament. Like, I feel like a lot of proof to what I'm saying is that going into this, Daniel Bryan was talking about how Smackdown was going to be the land of opportunity for a lot of young guys, I guess, or guys that haven't gotten their shine to make a name for themselves in the business, and for SmackDown to create stars out of them. And with that being said, the 3 out of the first 4 picks SmackDown made were guys that were, I guess, stars already in their own right. And, it was just a little bit, besides Dean Ambrose, they had John Cena, they picked second. AJ Styles, they picked second. John Cena, they picked third. And then Randy Orton, they picked fourth as their picks. And that's 2 guys that are 39 years old and another one that's 36 in Randy Orton. And Dean Ambrose is the one guy out of those 2 that aren't out of those 4 that aren't that old. And he's the WWE champion. And it to me, it just showed that, yeah, you wanted to have the land of opportunity, but at the same time, since it's a real competition, you had to make the picks that you felt would help your brand and would help bring eyes to your brand, because those guys are all, there's no land of, especially Cena, those guys are made already. Those guys don't have anything else to prove. Maybe AJ Styles a little bit, but no one else really. And not like, look at, you even heard about Sheamus, who was picked pretty late in this draft, for a guy who was a world champion, a former world champion not too long ago. He was picked pretty late, and he had a bone to pick with obviously with all parties involved, and he wants to, be back to the ways he was when he was a world champion for a long time, and he was a legitimate WWE superstar. And he wasn't the only one in this whole thing that felt that way. And, I'll get to that in a little bit. But like I said, SmackDown's first 4 picks were all guys that were pretty established, with exception to Dean Ambrose. But he's the champion, so technically he's established right now. The first 4 picks for Raw were Seth Rollins, Charlotte, the women's champion, Finn Balor from NXT, and Roman Reigns, the suspended, cheating, no good, dirty, bottom-feeding trash bag Roman Reigns. And going back to, when I told you I had heard about Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan talking about, their strategy going into the draft, Shane was talking about how they were on their heels from the beginning because they wanted the women's title to be on SmackDown. And Raw subsequently used their second pick to have Charlotte, the women's champion, on Raw. So it kind of curtailed their their idea of that happening on SmackDown. And to me, this is what doesn't make sense to me. They wanted the women's champion on SmackDown, and Raw stole that from them. So they have the WWE Heavyweight Champion in Dean Ambrose already, and they missed out on Charlotte, which there was nothing they could do about that because it was basically picking between Ambrose and Charlotte, and they had to pick Ambrose if Raw really had the idea to pick Charlotte second. So they missed out on Charlotte. Then they pick AJ Styles, and then Raw finishes the first round with Finn Balor, a name that he isn't proven yet on the main roster, but he's proven with as far as having the it factor with merchandise sales. There's enough Balor Club shirts to go around. I see every time when I went to the show on Tuesday, there were as many Balor Club shirts as there were any other type of shirt. And he's a bona fide star, and he has that it factor that they look for. So I can see why they picked him so early, and just to make a splash and kind of take SmackDown and kind of give Shane and Daniel something to worry about even more often early on in the draft, which is it seemed to work to a T because then SmackDown just started making picks. It seemed for name value rather than for the future, like they had previously branded themselves as. Their next pick was John Cena, then Randy Orton, and then they picked Bray Wyatt after Randy. But this is what I didn't understand. Raw went after SmackDown. After SmackDown picked Cena, Raw picked Brock Lesnar. Then SmackDown picked Randy Orton. Now Randy Orton is a great pick. I'm not disputing that he's not a great talent. His merchandise sales are great. He's as popular as any other person on the roster. But Randy Orton hasn't been wrestling for many, many months now with a shoulder injury, and he's making his comeback at Battleground to talk to Chris Jericho, and then he's going to actually wrestle Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, and it's going to be a big match. But what I don't understand is that if you guys missed out on a championship already with the Women's Championship, why not, and this is just my opinion, why not go after another championship that you could use to bring SmackDown's value up? And it goes along with everything that you guys said, young up and coming guys, and the pick that I'm talking about is the pick that Raw actually picked right after SmackDown picked Randy Orton, and that was the WWE Tag Team Champions, The New Day. And to me, that's a complete flub on SmackDown's part, because you guys go with Randy Orton and The New Day is still on the board, and you guys missed out on a champion that you said you wanted on your roster. So why not go with the next best champions on the roster? And it's not The Miz and it's not Rusev. It's going to be The New Day. So why not go with them? And instead of complaining about not getting the women, now you have an absolute legitimate tag team division already with just having The New Day there. And even though they're tag team champions, it's so funny because to me The New Day are so versatile. They can be tag team champions, but they have 3 stars as well, 3 potential stars, or 2 potential stars really, and then one person that is already an established superstar in Kofi Kingston. And and with the land of opportunity that SmackDown would be, you could take Big E and Xavier Woods and turn them into potential stars moving forward, which I feel like is something that needs to happen. I've said previously on this podcast, something that needs to happen with the New Day eventually, so that these guys aren't just left in the dust whenever this thing ends. Whenever the New Day ends, these guys have a legitimate foundation to become stars, as with Big E and Xavier Woods. But SmackDown completely missed out on it, and Raw gets another champion and the tag team champions. Now, Raw doesn't even have the main championship on their roster, but they honestly don't need it because as of right now, they have the women's championship, they have the tag team championships. They ended up picking the United States champion in Rusev, and we all already know that there's going to be an announcement next week on Raw about the Cruiserweight Championship being on Raw. So they have all these pieces, all these championships, and that's enough to fill a 3-hour show, in my opinion. They already have the top stars. They don't need the biggest belt to bring in all these viewers. They already have a bunch of top stars. They have all these championships that are very interesting to watch, with the new Cruiserweight Championship, the women's title, and the New Day, who are the most entertaining champions on the roster easily. Raw is going to be fine. In my opinion, Raw won this entire draft, and it was because of little things that SmackDown did, like that Randy Orton pick that didn't make sense to me. That because to me, Raw goes and picks Sami Zayn next, and like let's say you lose out on Randy Orton, and after you pick the New Day, Raw picks Randy Orton, right? SmackDown can go ahead right then and pick Sami Zayn and get another young guy that is that they can have as an opportunity to build as a star. And in my opinion, Sami Zayn is a star. Of all the guys that came up from NXT, Sami Zayn is my favorite, and it's because through hell and high water, you know, the guy's been through all these things. He's been turned on. He's had legitimate injuries and been out for a while. And for a guy whose spark probably should have ran out a long time ago, because he's run into some bad luck. You know, he's probably the shortest the shortest reigning NXT champion of all time, and he's you know, he comes and makes his debut on Raw and then gets injured on that same day and doesn't come back for another 6 months. You know, to me, a guy who's made the most of his opportunities, absolutely, and has had great matches. You know, his match with John Cena was great before, you know, obviously his shoulder started messing with him. His match with Nakamura is, a lot of people can say that's been match of the year to them so far at NXT TakeOver Dallas. And to me, Sami Zayn is a future star. He's the best worker of all the guys that have come up from NXT recently. Easily the best worker, in my opinion. His matches are always so unpredictable. And even with all the great spots that we've seen over and over again, he always finds a way to bring him into the match in an unpredictable way, so that you're always surprised when you see the Blue Thunder Bomb, or you're always surprised when you see that jump over the top rope. Like it still amazes you every single time you see it, which is a testament to being a great worker. But enough of Sami Zayn. You know, to me, SmackDown was on their heels the entire show. They did pick the Intercontinental Champion, The Miz, but I feel like they only picked The Miz because Raw had just picked Rusev, the United States Champion. So they didn't want, because you know the next pick Raw would have picked would have been Miz if SmackDown didn't pick him. So it was kind of them forcing their hand. And then after that happened, after that pick, Raw goes and drafts Kevin Owens. So it just shows that, you know, SmackDown had to pick The Miz. I'm sure SmackDown would have rather had Kevin Owens 1,000 times more than The Miz, but because The Miz is the champion, they had to be like, dang, all right, we have to take this pill and then lose out on guys like Enzo and Cass, who got picked after Kevin Owens, and guys like Gallows and Anderson, who I'm sure after picking AJ Styles second, I'm sure they legitimately did want Gallows and Anderson on their roster to just bring them all up as far as their value in WWE. You know, AJ Styles was great without them, but when he teamed up with them, he just brought his value up even higher, and bringing him up as well as Gallows and Anderson. You know, Raw can take the pill of Gallows and Anderson, and with drafting Finn Balor, they can actually repackage them into being with the club with Finn Balor as their leader. So they're not really losing much drafting them. And you know, SmackDown, like I said, SmackDown made a lot of mistakes. They made many mistakes, and I feel like after they missed out on the New Day, they just kind of said, all right, we're not going to even bother with any tag teams yet. We're going to worry about singles guys. So they go and pick Baron Corbin. They pick Bray Wyatt. They pick The Miz. And they miss out on Enzo and Cass, which in my opinion, you know, that would have helped their show tremendously. And letting Raw get Enzo and Cass and the New Day, it just kind of, to me, it kind of already solidifies Raw as the best show, because, you know, as entertaining as they both can be, I felt like they were at least going to have those two teams on separate shows, but having them both on Raw, that's just, you know, as great as Seth Rollins is their first pick, if he's not entertaining, they can always bring out Enzo and Cass in the New Day, and Chris Jericho, who was another pick of theirs, who people were surprised to hear. But to me, Chris Jericho has done the best work of his career, or some of the best work of his career these past couple months. He's been amazing, you know, getting over the stupid idiot thing, the drink it in, man, like being the delusional old guy who's living off of his past successes. Like Jericho's always had a great mind for the business. Jericho just always finds a way to rebrand himself and and get over with the crowd. And he does it all that he never fails to do it every time he comes back. And again, and that's another great pick for Raw. So like I said, I think SmackDown, after they missed out on the New Day, they figured, all right. And after they missed out on Charlotte, they kind of went into tunnel vision and said, okay, we need to get the best singles guys that we can right now, because of the fact that, we missed out on the women's championship, so we shouldn't focus on the women in the draft. We missed out on the tag champions, so we shouldn't focus on any tag teams in the draft. So by doing that, they missed out on Sasha Banks too. And I feel like the only reason why they drafted Becky Lynch was because Mick Foley kind of tipped his hat a little bit by saying, telling Shane and Daniel that, oh, well, there are actually women in this draft, guys. What are you guys doing? And then pick Sasha. So with SmackDown realizing that if you just know that the next pick that Raw would have picked would have been Becky if Becky didn't get picked directly after Sasha, because that having the 3 horsewomen right there, bang, like that's a big blow. That's a big blow to SmackDown. And to me, getting Becky Lynch was very important for SmackDown. They did miss out on Sasha and they missed out on Charlotte, but getting Becky Lynch at least saved their women's division on SmackDown. It at least saved it. I'm not going to say that it made it legitimate, but it saved it, because without Becky Lynch on that roster, as far as women go, there was no other person that they could have built their women's division around on that roster, besides maybe Paige. But Paige has kind of fallen off a lot, and it kind of showed in this draft, because Paige didn't get picked until 35th. She got picked 35th. And just to put that in perspective, she was picked behind people like Titus O'Neil. She was picked behind Kane. She was picked behind the Golden Truth, Nia Jax, who is an NXT superstar, a good one at that. But I mean, even Natalia, but I wouldn't put them as far as popularity. Paige beats them all out. So, that just shows you how much Paige has fallen off in these past couple months. And it's sad. She's still popular. Every time she comes out, she still gets a great ovation. And, she's still loved with the crowd. She still has her own little clique as far as her fans. But for some reason, she's just losing value in the company. And she's still young, so she still has a lot of time. But it's just a shame to see that with such a promising young superstar in Paige. I feel like, again, SmackDown was on its heels this entire draft by picking Becky Lynch, because they didn't want to have the worst women's division of all time. And then they did make a really great pick with American Alpha. Obviously, when I was in the crowd, I flipped out for that. I think I lost my voice at that moment. I think that's when my voice was completely gone after they drafted American Alpha, because I kind of forgot that they were going to probably get drafted. So when I heard that when I heard at the time, while I was at the show, I kind of marked out a little bit. But again, SmackDown made that pick because of the fact that they were on their heels a little bit. And I feel like Raw kind of made a mistake, because later on, when I watched the post-draft show, Stephanie and Mick Foley were talking about mistakes that they made, and Mick Foley talked about how Becky Lynch, he wishes they got them, because just having the 3 horsewomen would have been great. And missing out on American Alpha, Stephanie said she regrets that, because she really wanted them as part of Raw. And I don't know how truthful that is, because if they really wanted American Alpha, they could have had them very easily, because they had picked Enzo. Their last 2 picks before American Alpha got picked were both from Raw, and they were Enzo and Cass and Gallows and Anderson, 2 tag teams. So if they really wanted American Alpha, they could have got rid of one of those 2. And probably Gallows and Anderson. I don't know how much they scouted to see if SmackDown was going to pick American Alpha. They probably would have picked them with their next pick, because after American Alpha got picked, Raw made the best pick of the night and picked The Big Show. So obviously, they weren't really they didn't really have a direction to go after American Alpha got picked. So they went with The Big Show. But them picking Gallows and Anderson, I feel like was a mistake. They should have just let him go with AJ to SmackDown. And yeah, they would have had the club over on SmackDown, but you guys would have had a great young promising tag team, with Enzo and Cass, with the New Day, with they would have had a lot of their tag matches would have been must see. And having American Alpha go to SmackDown really raises SmackDown a whole lot. just singularly that one pick helps legitimize SmackDown's tag team division. And the funny thing is, to me, that was the only televised tag team that SmackDown picked was American Alpha. And after SmackDown went off air, and I was a little bit disappointed because being at the live show, let me just say this, being at the live show, I figured that, I had an hour before my train had came to Worcester so that I would go back home in Boston where I live. And I was a little bit disappointed because I thought after the televised show was over, they would continue the show, at least in the building, and have the picks keep coming in, and have a bunch of dark matches between people that weren't on the show. But that didn't happen. They just put everything away. And then I come back and hear that the rest of the picks were made on the WWE network. Freaking like, what? Come on, man. Like, that's messed up. You don't have any more shows for the rest of the week. SmackDown is taped on Tuesday. Everyone goes on break for Wednesday or whatever. You guys can stay another hour and keep the picks going, at least for the people in the crowd and stuff, which I was in. So I was a little bit disappointed about that, but it's not that big of a deal. But again, like I said, American Alpha, I feel like they legitimized SmackDown's tag team division single-handedly. And they, like I said, they only picked one tag team on TV, but they did pick a lot of tag teams on the post show. They ended up going. They got the Usos. They got the Ascension. Is even though they're not that big of a deal. They got Breezango, who has the potential to be very entertaining. They picked the Vaudevillains. So, like I said, they got Mojo Rawley and they got Zack Ryder. So if they wanted to bring the Hype Bros in, they could do that as well. Mojo Rawley. I said Mojo Rawley got drafted by SmackDown on NXT. They did say 6 NXT people were going to get drafted. It was technically 7, but counting American Alpha as 1, it was 6. But it went Finn Balor, American Alpha, Nia Jax, Alexa Bliss, Mojo Rawley, and Carmella were the 6 people drafted from NXT. And it was funny because, Nia Jax, when she got drafted, Stephanie kind of pulled one on us because she had said one of the biggest stars and women's stars in NXT, women's wrestlers in NXT. And immediately the first person we're going to think of is obviously Bayley. So as she said that, everyone, including myself in the crowd, was like, oh gosh, you could hear a hum in the crowd. Like if you ever go back and watch the show, you can hear a hum in the crowd like, wow, like, oh Bayley. And then she says Nia Jax, and it's just kind of the air is let out of the room like, like, dang, you just hyped it up like that. You didn't have to say women's wrestlers NXT. You could have just said Nia Jax, a great NXT star, because you just let the cat out of the bag. But we open the bag and it's not even a cat; it's a dead cat, and it's like, why? No offense to Nia Jax. Like I said, I've said previously on the show, I think Nia Jax is great. I think she's potentially becoming a women's. Her call up was very. I was expecting it, obviously, but I didn't want Stephanie to bring it up like that and have us expect Bayley and we get Nia Jax, because Bayley's on another level of stardom as far as I'm concerned with women's wrestlers on NXT and WWE and wherever. So, but again, like I said, SmackDown, I feel like they made a lot of good picks, okay picks. When the show came off rather than when the show was on, because when the show was on, they were just on their heels the whole time. And I feel like, I guess as the show went off, they were more calm and they made better decisions for their brand. Like I said, Becky Lynch and Natalya were the only 2 women drafted on the show when that was live. Excuse me. And American Alpha was the only tag team that they drafted at all before the show went off. Now, not to say that it's a big deal, but because Raw only picked Sasha Banks and Charlotte while the show was on, and Lana, I guess, if you count that with Rusev. Oh, and Nia Jax, so never mind. That point doesn't make any sense. But SmackDown had to realize that now that they picked Becky Lynch and Natalya, they need a women's division. So a lot of their picks off camera were tag teams and women. And they, like I said, they were playing from behind, and they ended up picking Naomi up. They ended up getting Eva Marie, which I think is a great pick. I think They could do a lot with Eva Marie. With the right storyline, Eva Marie could be a big star, a big heel, or a big whatever. She's polarizing, just like Roman Reigns. She's just not as good of a wrestler. So how do you counteract her not being a good wrestler? Even though she's polarizing, you do the opposite. Instead of having her wrestle, you have her, have her be a part of a faction where she doesn't have to, where wrestling isn't the biggest part of the faction. She could, I'm not gonna say do promos and stuff because I don't think she's very good at that either. But like I said, you have a polarizing person and you pick them that you get a chance to pick them that late in the draft. It's a commodity that isn't just to put it in perspective. The people that were picked before and after Eva Marie were Bo Dallas and the Shining Stars. So to me, in the bracket that Eva Marie was picked in, she was easily the biggest star and had the biggest ceiling. Low risk, high reward. You already have a couple of great, and then picking Carmella and Alexa Bliss too for that women's division, I feel like helped raise their women's division a whole lot higher than it was before that, because they only had Becky Lynch and Natalya, who were legitimate people that can be taken seriously on that women's division. Now, they had Naomi, who's a great athlete, but has a hard time getting over with the crowd. I feel like a mistake that they did make was they ended up missing out on Paige, who, again, another person who is polarizing, who has a high ceiling. You missed out on the biggest people in the women's division, quote unquote, Charlotte and Sasha Banks. But in my opinion, I really like Becky Lynch. I feel like, when Daniel said that Becky Lynch was the best women's wrestler on the roster, I honestly believe that because, one, we haven't seen enough of Sasha for me to say that as far as on Raw. Everybody's just assuming she's going to have this big push with the women's title and blah, blah, blah. But to me, Becky Lynch is the only one that's really proven it, as far as getting over with the crowd and on the main roster. Sasha's gotten over on NXT, but I guess her popularity has carried over to Raw, but she hasn't really earned, I don't want to say she hasn't really earned that doesn't make much sense, but she hasn't done much on the main roster to win me over, at least. Becky Lynch has had 2 matches with Charlotte already for the women's title. She had a match at WrestleMania, which was great. All 3 of them did. To me, it was the best match on It was the best technical match at WrestleMania. They had a couple of little spots here and there that could have been a little bit better, but beggars can't be choosers, in my opinion. So Becky Lynch to me is the most, she's the only good guy on the roster, so she's the most over person, and she's over because of her own merits, not because NXT made her over. Becky Lynch was actually the only girl on that NXT 4 horsewoman thing to not win the NXT Women's Championship. And not because she's not as talented as the rest, it just ended up like that. And with that lack of momentum, unlike the other 3, but she still found a way to get herself over with the crowd, and she's become one of the more popular divas on the roster. And it's not a given that just because you came up with all these other people means that you were gonna just automatically, with this Divas Revolution, you were just gonna get over, and no matter who you were gonna get over. That's not true. Because look what happened to Paige after the Divas Revolution. She fell off big time. Look what happened to Naomi. She fell off big time. Tamina wasn't even in this draft. And Alicia Fox, who was part of Team Bella, fell off big time. Not to say that she was that high in the rankings before, but she didn't escalate herself. Becky Lynch is the only one, without that has been there the entire time, that has gotten herself over and kept herself popular throughout that entire Divas Revolution. In my opinion, Sasha Banks went missing for a very long time. Everybody was asking, where did Sasha go? Where did Sasha go? Because they realized that they didn't want her momentum to stifle. So because they didn't want her momentum to stifle, they decided, let's keep her off of TV, because we don't trust that she can stay over without being a part of without going after the women's title. That's basically what they were saying. And it's not a knock to Sasha. Sasha's one of the more popular persons on the roster, period, men or women or men. But Becky Lynch is the only one, and she didn't. It's not like she won the women's title. Charlotte is the women's champion. So regardless of, and when she first won it, she was a face, and she wasn't getting that over with the crowd. So they had to turn her heel. And to me, in my opinion, she's a way better heel than face because it's more believable because she's the big, she's the daughter of the two-time Hall of Famer, so she should be cocky. She should be, I have genetically superior and all that stuff. That should be a part of a heel character, and I'm happy that they turned her heel. But like I said, she's been the women's champion this entire time. So whether she got herself over or not, she has the title, so she can be over or she can be nothing. But at the end of the day, she's still going to be around. So that, like I said, I've vouched enough for Becky Lynch, but SmackDown getting Becky Lynch was a lot bigger than people thought. And she can actually really be the lead horse in this women's division on SmackDown, in my opinion. And with the likes of Carmella, Alexa Bliss, Eva Marie, even Naomi, who can have a revitalization of her career, hopefully, that she can, and Natalia, she can spearhead that women's division on SmackDown. Now, like I said, I think they missed out on Paige. They should have got Paige because Paige is a big star. They had picked Kane right before Paige got picked. So to me, that's just another one of those little mistakes that SmackDown made that could have helped their roster tremendously. Because as good as Kane is, it's kind of tough to book Kane because he's a monster, and you can't have him lose all the time because then he becomes nothing. So unless you're gonna go with the corporate Kane route and have him do funny skits in the backstage, it's gonna be kind of tough for Kane to put over some of these young guys that SmackDown picked, like the Mojo Rallies, like the Apollo Cruzes, like Eric Rowan if they were gonna give him a push. Zack Ryder, Kalisto, all these guys that they picked, Baron Corbin. I guess Baron Corbin is a little bit more believable, but, for the rest of them, it's going to be a little bit tough to do anything with Kane. So I don't know why they would pick him over Paige. But, like I said, it was another little mistake SmackDown made, in my opinion. But speaking of some of those singles guys, most notably Apollo Crews, who didn't even make TV. He didn't even get picked on TV. And how the mighty have fallen so early. In my opinion, Apollo Crews he wasn't the only guy that was highly underrated in this draft, but to me, he was a big part. When you thought of the new era, Apollo Crews is one of the first guys you think of as far as the new era, maybe even the first guy, because he had the little feud with Sheamus about being in the new era, and he was probably the only guy that had a new era feud that made sense. AJ Styles had his new era feud with Cena, but AJ Styles is 39 years old. There's nothing new about him at all, except him being on WWE television. So to me, Apollo Crews is one of the guys that kind of spearheaded that new era movement, and for him to get picked so late, and him coming in the day after WrestleMania, just to put it in perspective, Enzo and Cass was picked the day after WrestleMania. They came up on the main roster the day after WrestleMania as well. And they got picked 20th. And Apollo Crews got picked 45th. And it wasn't even on TV. It was on the post-Raw show. So, the people that were picked around Apollo Crews, right before Apollo Crews, Summer Rae got picked by Raw. So SmackDown thought that Summer Rae would be more of an asset to their roster than Raw thought Summer Rae would be more of an asset to their roster than Apollo Crews did. And after Apollo Crews got picked, Mark Henry got picked. So it just kind of goes to show you like the company he was kept in while he was getting picked. And it's just like, wow, that's how low they see this guy. But yet, he was supposed to be a guy that was a big part of this new era. And I feel like it's a steal for SmackDown. It's a hell of a steal for SmackDown. That's another guy that like I said, they made a lot of great picks when this whole thing came off. On TV, when I left the show, on my ride back home, I'm like, Raw won this 1,000%. Raw won this draft. And SmackDown made a lot of stupid mistakes that helped Raw win the draft. But after watching the post-show, I feel like SmackDown did catch up a little bit because Raw just drafted a bunch of people that are going to be on the bottom of the barrel, while SmackDown picked guys that you could potentially see them having a chance, at least a chance, and having an opportunity on SmackDown, whether it's for the Miz's title or whether they just get into a feud with whatever it is that they're going to get into. And I'm happy about that. But, like I said, a lot of the little things that they did wrong, it's going to hurt them in the long run. And it's a shame to say it, but, obviously I think Raw won this draft very, very easily. Easily they won the draft. And another big mistake I think SmackDown made was I feel like, they wanted to have, like I said, in storyline, right? In storyline and shoot whatever the hell it is. This pick doesn't make much sense that they made. And the pick I'm talking about is Natalia. And it's not because, you know, to me, Natalia isn't a good worker and she got picked 27th and she didn't deserve that spot. No, it's not that at all. They obviously needed another woman for their women's division. But the thing is, Natalia and Naomi, Alexa Bliss, even Marie, it's almost a toss up. Natalia, actually, I'll put over those guys a little bit, but not by too much. And it's almost a even Steven with all those women after Becky Lynch, in my opinion. But the reason why I say Natalia's pick was bad was because the pick right after her on Raw ended up being the 28th pick, which was Cesaro. And yeah, Cesaro got picked very, very late, in my opinion. He got picked after the Big Show. He got picked after Nia Jax. He got picked after Neville, who hasn't been on TV in forever. Mind you, Neville is a great in-ring worker, but Cesaro is one of the best, if not the best, in-ring worker in that company. He got picked before. Dolph Ziggler got picked before him. Natalia got picked before him. And Cesaro, it was interesting because I watched a post interview with Cesaro with JoJo, and poor JoJo, she has no idea that this guy is probably fuming in the back of his head, and he's such a professional that he was mad, but at the same time he still tried to keep it professional. But he did lose it. He did lose it a little bit, and not lose it as his tone, but with what he was saying. And he was very. It was very evident that Cesaro was mad where he was picked. He was mad that he got picked to Raw because he figured SmackDown was going to be the wrestling show. And it makes sense because if SmackDown was the wrestling show, it makes sense why they wouldn't draft guys that are great at promos, because they're not going to have many promos or long-winded promos. So guys like Enzo and Cass, guys like the New Day, guys like Chris Jericho, who have the highlight reel, guys like Seth Rollins, who comes out and talks a lot, women like Charlotte who come out and talk a lot. Those people, I can see why maybe they didn't draft them, because they realized the show is going to be more about wrestling. But if that's the case, why did you let Cesaro fall so far? One of the better wrestlers, one of the guys that is like the guys you were talking about, guys that were undervalued, that were great wrestlers, that are great in-ring workers, that can get over, that'll have an opportunity on SmackDown. That right there scream. If you took that definition and you wanted a name for it, the name would be Cesaro with Cesaro's picture in the dictionary. But yet they let him go to Raw. And Raw didn't even steal him. He was falling so far. He got picked in the 6th round at the 28th pick. People like Baron Corbin, Dolph Ziggler, Natalia, they all got picked before Cesaro did. And there was a flub. That was another flub that SmackDown made. They let him go to Raw, where he's just going to be another mid-carder on Raw. And it's unfortunate to say that, but that's what it's going to be. And on SmackDown, he really had an opportunity, whether it was to go for the Miz's Intercontinental Championship or to just make a name and become a household name on SmackDown. But they flub with it, and he goes to Raw, and it's just going to be the same old thing on Raw, which is why he was so disappointed in his interview. Actually, let me play the interview for you with him and JoJo. This is the second question that she asked him. She asked him a question already talking about how he felt about being picked to Raw. And he was disappointed. He felt like he should be on SmackDown, but he feels like he can, like he's done in his whole career, he can overcome. So he's not even saying that he liked being picked to Raw. He's disappointed that he's basically disappointed that he got picked to Raw, and that he wants people to understand that he can still make the most out of a less than likely situation. So here's what he was saying to JoJo at the second question after she asked him.
Well, speaking of GMs, how do you think that the Raw general manager Mick Foley and Stephanie McMahon being the commissioner, how do you think they'll coexist?
Honestly, that's part of the problem that you just asked me that question, because I don't really care. I think Raw going forward needs to be about the superstars. It needs to be about the performers in the ring, and not about what how Stephanie McMahon and Mick Foley coexist. They need to be there to mediate and make the best show. But that does not need to be the focus. So the focus is to be on the superstar who got drafted. We have Seth Rollins, we have New Day, we have Finn Balor coming up from NXT. Those are the people we should be here talking about, but we're talking about Stephanie McMahon and Mick Foley, which is annoying to me because a lot of people talk a lot. It's always a lot of talking, and you haven't heard me talk that much. It's actually great. I can be able to talk, and people can see I can actually speak. My brain can form thoughts that come out through my mouth. The problem is sometimes I stumble words because I speak 5 different languages. We know all that. So the thing is, I like to speak the language that everybody speaks all around the world. WWE Universe loves. That's the language of wrestling that I do in the ring. That's what I do best. That's why I always deliver. This is our own Raw.
I mean, there's not much else I can say after that. Like, come on, you heard the tone of voice he was using and how he was angry with, the fact that JoJo would even ask him a question like that about Stephanie and Shane. He's a part of the old school, and realizing that he's a great wrestler, he wants Raw to be talked about more as wrestling instead of all these stupid little soap operas and dramas. And he probably felt like SmackDown would have been the greatest opportunity for that. But unfortunately, he was drafted to Raw. So, like I said, this is going to be a competition at the end of the day. And the guys that get left behind, unfortunately, they'll get left behind because I feel like this is a shoot between Shane and Stephanie. They're really going to be coming at each other's throats with these with trying to get the better ratings for their respective brands. And I feel like something that John Cena had said on one of the posts in his post-draft interview really big was something that was true about how. It's going to be like a dog-eat-dog world, and he's excited that people are putting SmackDown down as the B show because he is up for the challenge to kind of change that perception in people's minds. Let me play that clip for you.
I like, as much as I have differences with AJ Styles, I like when a guy gets drafted and says, you know what, I'm going to be champ. Because that means I have another guy on my side who wants to make this brand number one. Whoever thinks that Raw is the flagship, especially after this pick has been made, is in for a rude awakening, my friend.
Boom, I like that.
For you,
I like that.
saying that, for you not always being the number one guy, Dean Ambrose hasn't always been the number one guy, AJ Styles hasn't always been the number one guy. What about this opportunity for everyone to kind of rise to the occasion here on SmackDown?
This is an opportunity, and I will even give props to the competition. An opportunity for Raw as well. Every single person is going to get a chance to showcase themselves, and that's what lasting staying power is in this business. Taking advantage of opportunity. The fact that we now have brands competing against each other and new talent from NXT being brought up and being drafted. Everyone is hungry because it essentially is a fresh start for everyone. You look at it as a demotion. I look at it as a fresh start.
No, I didn't say it's demotion. I said
You said demotion. Can we?
No, I asked him. I know I asked
the
him.
footage.
So you can see John Cena is a really competitive guy, and he has a competitive spirit as far as what he thinks SmackDown can be in the future, and that's great to see. At least one guy believes that SmackDown can be something that's great. So hopefully John Cena can rally his troops, because I feel like he's one of the only guys on there that can actually help that brand become great. And SmackDown, like I said, they lost this battle as far as the draft goes. They lost the battle, but they're far from losing the war, in my opinion. They have a long way to go, but they have a lot of great pieces. And even though they missed out on a lot of great pieces as well, they still have some that they can use to salvage and help make SmackDown great. And they have in my opinion, they have the advantage from the beginning because, one, they drafted the champion, barring what happens at Battleground, even though my Battleground predictions are going to be a lot different than everyone else's. And not only that, but they're only a 2-hour show as opposed to Raw's 3-hour product. To me, a 2-hour show is kind of perfect for something like that because I don't really ever sit down and watch something that's 3 hours long. Raw is probably the only thing, and I don't really sit down for the entire Raw product. I kind of, phase in and out every now and then. And unless I'm watching like a movie in the theaters that's 3 hours long, I rarely sit down for 3 hours. So SmackDown to me is the perfect length for someone who likes wrestling. It's the perfect length in general. I feel like in the height of wrestling, the shows were 2 hours. So you take that formula and you run with it. But I understand they do the 3 hours, they make a lot of money with the third hour, but it kind of waters down the product a little bit. And it's gonna, regardless of what people say, it's gonna water it down even more after this draft, because you just took the roster and cut it in half. Now, they did this because a lot of people weren't getting opportunities on the rosters, and they had a lot of talent coming up from NXT, and they were going to have even more talent from NXT coming up. So they realized that they had to either split the brands or get rid of a lot of people, and they weren't going to do the latter. So they realized that splitting up the brands would be the best idea. And I wasn't a fan of it at first, but it makes, over time, I realized their ideology behind it, and it makes sense. And I'm 100% behind it. But at the same time, SmackDown still, Raw still being 3 hours, it's still kind of, it's still a little bit iffy to me as how well they can fit 3 hours fine, but it's how well they can do it, and if they can continue to get good ratings while they're doing it. So SmackDown has the advantage there, only being 2 hours, so they don't have to that much time to fill up. So like I said, I'm a fan. I want to see the underdog triumph. So I want to see SmackDown do its thing. We'll see moving forward. I hope that they do eventually get everything figured out, because they don't have much time to figure it out. They have their first show after Battleground on Tuesday, so we'll see where they go from there.
Your time is up, my time is now. You can't see me, my time is now. It's the franchise where I'm shining now. You can't see me, my time is now. Forgot fell off, I'm still hot, knocking shell off. My money stacked back, plus I can't turn the swell off. The franchise doing big business, I'm lit, it's automatic. I win this, so you
So the champ is here. This is Heartbreak on the Perfect Podcast. I want to say happy birthday to the GOAT, my biggest motivation to do this kind of thing. The reason why I'm even a wrestling fan all over again, believe it or not. The Heartbreak Kid himself, Shawn Michaels, July 22nd. It's his birthday. Happy birthday to him. I have a quick personal story, I guess, while I'm playing John Cena's music. It's weird because I can say I was a wrestling fan when I was a kid, and as a kid you don't remember how you figure things out, but you just know. And I remember being in a preschool and kindergarten, knowing all the names of everybody in DX. I could name them all. I probably didn't even know how to count to 100 at the time, but I can name everybody in DX. So it was funny. It was weird. I did like wrestling was a big boom back then, and that was probably the late '90s. So when everybody knew wrestling, when it was a part of pop culture, and how much I wish it was like that now. But like I said, I had actually gotten in trouble because as I was leaving my daycare, I had turned around and I knew exactly what I was doing. I remember the moment very vividly, and I might have been only like 5 years old. But I turned around and I gave my daycare teacher, the suck it sign a couple times, and then I ran into my mom's car, not thinking that she would stop my mom and we could just like, it was almost like an armed robbery thing. I go in, get the cash, and run out, and my getaway car is just raring to go. But unfortunately, my getaway car wasn't going anywhere, and my mom gets out the car, talks to the teacher, and I go home and probably get one of the worst beatings of my life because I did that. And then not only that, but I get banned from watching any of this wrestling stuff because of, you know, the bad things that I had gotten from the wrestling. So, you know, because of maybe it wasn't just that moment, but that was one of the reasons why I couldn't watch it as a kid, and one of the reasons why I feel like I'm such a big fan now, believe it or not, because, you know, I guess my love for the business was there since I was a kid, and I always go back to things I did when I was young, and I did them without any reasoning behind it, and to kind of shape the person I am now. So wrestling was one of those things. As I got older, you know, I didn't watch it at all. You know, I was doing other things. I was playing basketball a lot, and I didn't watch it at all. But it was weird. It was always like it was always around here and there. You know, I remember as a teenager, I always remember a ladder match between Jeff Hardy and The Undertaker. And Jeff Hardy was so close to winning the title, and he just was fingertips away, and he lost. But Undertaker showed him respect after the match, which was something that like people had never seen before. And Jeff Hardy was always my favorite wrestler until I kind of discovered Shawn Michaels, even though, you know, I already knew who he was, but, you know, there was one summer I was home and I was just working and I didn't have anything to do. I was bored, but I had a phone that had internet, so I would be on my phone all the time. And for some reason, I couldn't tell you the exact reason why, but I started looking up a lot of things on Shawn. I can't remember the exact moment that made me start doing it, but I read his Wikipedia page. Like, you know, I was watching some matches, and I just while I was reading his Wikipedia page, it just kept saying he won this, he won that, he won this, he won that, and these are all things that were happening early in his career, like, you know, the mid '90s, before his back injury. And I'm like, wow, this guy was really good. And, you know, I didn't even know he had a career that's successful before, you know, before, you know, his second run. That's really when I knew Shawn Michaels was that second run. But I didn't know that cocky, arrogant, you know, lay down for nobody Shawn Michaels from the early '90s, from the mid '90s and stuff like that. So it really fascinated me, and it kind of helped me build the little persona that I have now, as far as, you know, I call myself Heartbreak now, and it's all a tribute to that guy. And you know, this podcast, getting back into wrestling, you know, watching his matches. I watched his WrestleMania 25 match for the first time on my birthday, and it was the biggest part of my birthday, believe it or not. It was my favorite, at least my favorite part of my birthday this past year. You know, it just goes to show you how new I really am to the business. But I feel like I have a really good mind for it, which is why I do this podcast. But like I said again, it wouldn't all be possible without me falling in love with the business all over again, thanks to the Heartbreak Kid. So happy birthday, Shawn Michaels. You continue to inspire people whether you know it or not. So I appreciate you for that. But anyway, like I was saying, let's get into these Battleground predictions. My dude, John Cena. So Battleground, for those of you who don't know, Battleground is a pay-per-view that is gonna happen on Sunday, this upcoming Sunday, this weekend, and it's a pay-per-view that is whether you're a wrestling fan or you're not a wrestling fan, you know, it's gonna be very interesting. It's gonna have a lot of firsts and a lot of lasts, and it's a very interesting pay-per-view because of the fact that, one, it's the last pay-per-view kind of before the brand split. Even though the brand split already happened, all these matches on this pay-per-view were rivalries that were developed before this brand split thing. So the next pay-per-view, SummerSlam in August, is going to be, you know, both brands, but, you know, the feuds and stuff that get developed for that pay-per-view are going to be within the brand. So Battleground is going to be very unique. It's going to have their main event is going to be a triple threat between all three members of the Shield, who were a former faction, a former brotherhood, and they're all going against each other for the WWE World Heavyweight Title. And it's a storyline that's been around for the last 3-4 years. Ever since the Shield debuted, the storyline has been started. So this is the culmination of a very long arcing storyline between these three brothers, or former brothers. So it's like I said on my last podcast, you know, if WWE does this right and this match goes the way it's supposed to, and it has a great ending, it could be a 5-star match, because, you know, one of the key components, in my opinion, to a great 5-star match is the story behind the match before the match even starts. And how could you write a better story than this? So, quickly going into the background of this triple threat match, Seth Rollins had beat Roman Reigns at the last pay-per-view at Money in the Bank, but Dean Ambrose had won the Money in the Bank briefcase, which gives him a title match anywhere he wants. So he cashed it in on Seth Rollins, his former brother in the Shield, immediately after he beat Roman Reigns, and he was too tired to defend himself. So Dean Ambrose ended up winning the WWE Championship. And so now there's a triple threat match between the three. But the interesting part about this is Roman Reigns got suspended for taking illegal drugs, as we all know already. I'm kind of just doing this background for people that are watching that don't know what's going on. But I'm sure most of you that are watching know what I'm talking about, hopefully. If not, it's okay. But again, so Roman Reigns got suspended for 30 days. But the thing is, his suspension is up, I think maybe today or tomorrow. So he's going to be there for the pay-per-view, and he's going to be in the main event. And Roman Reigns was a guy who was, portrayed as the biggest good guy in the company, and they were going to make him the new big star. So now that he's been caught taking illegal performance-enhancing drugs, it's going to be a big turnaround when he comes out. He's going to get booed like crazy. And as we all know, Roman Reigns has already been booed a lot. People don't like him already. So this is going to make it 10 times worse. But the thing is, the company never acknowledged him being a bad guy. They never acknowledged the crowd booing him. They never would think about acknowledging that. They just kind of tried to keep pushing him as a good guy. And this is where, if you guys remember on my last show, I had had a statement where I had said that I think this is going to be a great match because they're going to have a double turn or whatever. They're going to turn Seth Rollins into a good guy and presumably turn Roman Reigns into a heel, a bad guy, with this one match alone, kind of like WrestleMania 13 with Stone Cold and Bret Hart. It's happened before. It can happen again. And I think they're going to turn Roman into the biggest bad guy the company has seen in a long, long time. And they can do that because he's already disliked. And the reason why I see the lines in the sand, so to speak, is because during the draft, Booker T was talking to the Usos, and those are Roman Reigns' cousins. They're both Polynesian, Samoan, so they have a history together. And he was talking to the Usos and talking about Roman Reigns and saying how the fans hate Roman Reigns and how people just don't like the guy. And that was a shock to me. I was absolutely shocked, and I don't think anyone else has talked about this on any other podcast, as far as I know, but because I listened to them. But no one caught that Booker T actually brought up on WWE television that Roman Reigns, the fans hate Roman Reigns. The fans dislike him. They don't like him very much. And that right there is the line in the sand. That is the writing on the wall right there, that they brought it up themselves. And that, I'm telling you, that's something that they haven't done yet. They have never done with Roman Reigns. They have never came out and acknowledged that the fans didn't like him. Even though the fans haven't liked him for quite a while now, they haven't said anything about it. They always maintain that he was a very popular guy, that the crowd loved him, that the fans loved him. But they actually brought it up that the fans hate him. And at first I had thought in my head, Booker T's making a mistake. He's bringing this up on accident. But I didn't think he was, because he said it at least 3 times, that the fans hate him. The fans really don't like Roman Reigns, blah, blah, blah. And then I started to realize it was a deliberate thing he was doing. He wanted to put the bug in the fans' ears, so to speak. He wanted to put the bug in their ear that he wasn't liked, so that when this heel turn happens, they had already drawn the writing on the wall as far as people realizing that this was going to happen. Like I said, with all heel turns, there are little things that happen every time there's a heel turn that kind of hints towards it. It can't just come out of nowhere. The only time it kind of came out of nowhere was WrestleMania 17 when Stone Cold turned heel. And even then, there were maybe very, 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 very subtle hints that he was going to turn heel. But again, it was a shock to most people. That was probably the biggest one that didn't make much sense. But even the one where Shawn Michaels kicks Marty Jannetty and puts his head through the window and breaks up the Rockers, they had a real fight backstage before that. So everyone had known, at least, the hardcore fans had known that that was an inevitability, that they were going to break up. It was just a question of how, because they had already had an altercation backstage. So their tag team days were all but over. So to me, having them come out on WWE television and acknowledge that Roman is a bad guy kind of solidifies the fact that I think Roman is going to be turned heel at Battleground, which is already exciting enough for me to want to watch. The rest of the matches, I could, not to say I could care less about them, but, because of this whole brand split thing, I feel like these matches don't make sense. They can go either one of two ways. They can have it so that Raw gets every single title and have Raw members win every title, so that in the long run, SmackDown has to create its own titles so that they'll have separate titles for each brand. They'll either do that, or they'll either do that, or they'll do what I'm gonna say right now, which is what I think is gonna happen. But that whole idea with SmackDown losing all the belts and having to create their own, that's something that I thought about. It was cool. I don't think that's gonna happen, but hey, it's a possibility. So I'm putting that bug in you guys' ear so that you can understand that could possibly be a potential outcome. But as far as Battleground, I'll try to go through these predictions pretty quickly because, like I said, these matches almost mean nothing in the long scheme of things because they're really going to go towards this brand split thing, and this is kind of before. So that's why Battleground is a little bit of a unique pay-per-view where the matches don't really matter, but they're interesting just to see how they end because we know that these feuds are going to be the end of these feuds come that next Monday after Battleground is over. So Becky Lynch and Natalya, they were both drafted to SmackDown, so their feud can probably continue. One of the only ones in this whole thing that can actually continue beyond this show. So I think that barring any shenanigans between anybody else coming to interfere on Becky Lynch gets a much-deserved victory on Natalya, which will be a big deal because Natalya is a former Divas champion, probably multi-time Divas champion. And she's one of the more respected technical female wrestlers on the roster. So for Becky Lynch to get a one-on-one singles victory on her cleanly is a big deal. Charlotte couldn't even get that. Charlotte is the women's champion, and Charlotte couldn't even get a one-on-one victory on Natalya. So the more I'm saying it now, the more I think Becky Lynch is going to win because why wouldn't SmackDown want their biggest women's star in Becky Lynch to be as strong as possible? And by doing that, they have her beat Natalya. So it makes a lot of sense. It'll probably be the first time Natalya loses cleanly in a while, but to Becky Lynch, I think it'll only strengthen their brand, so why not do it? Next up, The Miz and Darren Young versus Darren Young. Let's be great again, Darren Young. I gotta say, this Darren Young with Bob Backlund has been great. Seeing Bob Backlund on TV has been great. I think they have something with that. Like I said, having them on the skits and stuff was getting very boring and bland, but having them on TV now live and having Bob Backlund's craziness being shown out, we were, when I was at the SmackDown Live show, we were chanting Bob Backlund's name. We were like, we want Backlund because the guy, he's a magnet. He's been a magnet since he was a champion in the 70s. He held the championship for like 8 years straight or something ridiculous like that. Not 8 years. It was like maybe like 6 or something like that. I don't know. But Bob Backlund is a great dude. He will be forever over with the crowd, regardless of his age. And he's strong as hell. Darren Young's probably 200 plus pounds, 250 plus, and he was carrying him around, picking him up and carrying him around like a kid. And this is a 250-pound man, and Bob Backlund's like 60-something years old, or maybe 70-something years old, and he's carrying around a 250-pound guy. So it just goes to show, man, that guy's a freak of nature. You talk about Brock Lesnar. Bob Backlund was probably the Brock Lesnar of the 70s. Just a lot less steroidy and illegal. But anyway, let's not talk about that. We'll go Darren Young and The Miz, Intercontinental title. Darren Young is on Raw. The Miz is on SmackDown. I think that The Miz retains the title, but hopefully he puts over Darren Young strong and Darren Young ends the match. It feels like Darren Young is a lot better off at the end of the match than he was to start, but I think it's better to keep the Intercontinental title on SmackDown and have The Miz lose to someone on SmackDown and help SmackDown's brand get better from that. Another potential thing I thought was let me move on from there. But I think The Miz is winning that match. The next match is the United States title being on line between Rusev and Zack Ryder. Zack Ryder getting drafted to SmackDown, I believe. Rusev going on Raw. Rusev was mad as well that he was drafted late, but it felt more like a work. It felt more like a scripted promo. It wasn't really scripted. Rusev has been very good with this non-scripted stuff recently, but it didn't feel like he was legitimately angry. It felt like it was just more, his character was angry. So no blaming him on that. It was just there were so many shoot things that happened after the draft was over that seeing something that didn't feel like a shoot was almost a bit of a disappointment. So under normal circumstances, Rusev's promo after the draft would have been great, but whatever. I'm just pulling hairs here, but splitting hairs. That's the term. But Rusev and Zack Ryder for the United States title. I think Rusev's going to retain the title. It just makes sense. Zack Ryder, he's had big wins recently, but then he just lost his big win over Sheamus. So, Sheamus gets his win back, and it's just like Zack is just back where he was post-WrestleMania. So I see Rusev winning. A potential thing that I had thought that they were going to switch the titles, have Zack Ryder on SmackDown be the U.S. champion, and have The Miz lose his title and give it to Darren Young and have that title be on Raw. But the U.S. title is significantly less significant than the Intercontinental title, so I think it makes more sense for it to be on SmackDown, since SmackDown is already playing from behind in a lot of people's eyes as far as the roster goes. So it would be a lot better if they kept the IC title, especially after you hear what I pitch for the main event. So Rusev wins the United States Championship. So now we go into the Divas. Sasha Banks and a mystery partner versus Charlotte and Dana Brooke. Whoever the mystery partner is, I think that Sasha Banks' team wins. This is the second month in a row that they've done a tag team match with the champion, because they're just kind of putting off wasting time until SummerSlam, where they inevitably do Charlotte versus Sasha Banks one-on-one. So Dana Brooke got drafted to Raw, so she can still be with Charlotte, unfortunately. But I feel like she's coming into her own as far as being a lackey. Dana Brooke is, but again, it's just not. They need a way to make Charlotte entertaining, so I guess that's why they have Dana Brooke there. After Ric Flair left, they don't trust Charlotte to be by herself. And all right. So let me go with this first. I think that the mystery partner is going to be, if I had to guess, I mean, the consensus a lot of people are saying is going to be Bayley, but I don't think they're going to go that route. I don't think they're going to go with Bayley. I think they'll go someone a lot less conventional, I guess. Someone that people, I don't know. I don't really want to have a prediction. I kind of want to just let it rock and then find out when it happens. But if I had to make a guess, I would guess Bayley, just like everyone else, because Sasha Banks hinted that she didn't want Bayley as a partner on a Facebook Live video. So subsequently, in WWE logic, if you're denying something, that means it's going to happen. So Bayley will be her partner. I hope they go somewhere different and have a different route, maybe like Lita or something cool like that. Like that would be cool. Lita or Trish Stratus coming back for one match, or I don't know, somebody from NXT or something. I don't know, Summer Rae. I don't know, but it would be great to see something unconventional happen for this match instead of having Bayley. As cool as it would be to see Bayley, I think let's just save that for after SummerSlam. As far as Charlotte goes, I have a little thing I want to say about Charlotte. Charlotte. I feel like Charlotte has been a very good champion, and she's gotten so much better over the last couple months, and I have high praise for her. And I had said in my previous show, when I had predicted the draft results, I said my top 6 people, I put Charlotte in there. And the fact that she got picked third wasn't that much of a surprise to me, because I had put her in my top 6, and I said that she was one of the must-see people on the roster, regardless of titles or whatever. She was must-see, because I didn't put The Miz on that list. I didn't put Dean Ambrose on that list either, and he was the World Heavyweight Champion. I think my 6 on that list were Roman Reigns, if I'm not mistaken. Like polarizing people, I had put Roman Reigns, John Cena, uh, Seth Rollins, AJ Styles, Charlotte, and the New Day. I don't know. I can't remember the other one. I can't remember. You have to go back and listen. I don't have a very good memory, but it's going to be interesting because in the next coming months, if Charlotte does lose the title at SummerSlam to Sasha, I still can't see it. I personally can't see it. I see Charlotte retaining it on Sasha, unlike everybody else. And this is why, because Sasha, like we said, Sasha can get over without the crowd. I mean, without having the belt. She's over with the fans. She's losing momentum slowly and slowly, but I think her momentum will be more positive than Charlotte would if Charlotte didn't have the belt. Once Charlotte loses the belt, what's next for her? She was the champion and she's genetically superior, and that's like her gimmick, is to be the best. So when she's not the best, what is she? It's kind of tough because people kind of can say that about John Cena as well, but John Cena had a great promo. So at the end of the day, even if Cena didn't have the belt, he could still come out and entertain you. Charlotte can't do that. Not yet, at least. So what's next for her, in my opinion? She's not going to be the heel that puts over a bunch of people to get like faces to get them over, because her character is too strong for that now. So where's she going to go after she loses the belt? That's the tough thing. They're going to give her the wrestling machine gimmick like Kurt Angle, which is to me one of the greatest gimmicks of all time, because without that, Kurt Angle's career, even though it was very short while he was the wrestling machine, it kind of goes stagnant without that, because with that gimmick, it's kind of saying like putting him in the category of the Undertaker, where it's like, this guy is the best, but he doesn't need the belt to be the best. He is the best. We all know he's the best. And this wrestling machine gimmick that he had showed that he could cook people in like 5 minutes. In 3 minutes, he could cook a wrestler that was legitimate and just kick the shit out of him. And that can be like that for Charlotte, but I don't know how far, the creativity between Mick Foley and Stephanie McMahon are to do something like that with Charlotte after she loses the belt, kind of having her go crazy and realizing, okay, you know what, I'm the best, come out with a mouth guard and be the wrestling machine of the women's division, and kind of being like the Undertaker and being the best, but not having the belt to have to know that she was the best, So, excuse me. So yeah. Anyway, this match, Sasha Banks' team wins. Sasha and mystery partner, aka maybe Bayley. The next match, the New Day and the Wyatt family, a blood feud between these guys. I see. It just kind of show you I'm kind of going off the top right now. I didn't really think of these in advance, but I can see that if I had to make a guess between the New Day and the Wyatts, I would probably go with. I would go with the New Day, because the Wyatts are broken up. So even if the Wyatt family wins, what's left in store for the Wyatts? They're all broken up. Bray Wyatt is on SmackDown, Eric Rowan is on SmackDown, and Braun Strowman is on Raw. So even if the New Day win, even if the Wyatts win, there's no momentum for them to continue on with that, because they're going to go on to their separate storylines on their separate brands. So it only makes sense for the New Day to win, because they're actually still together, at the end of the day. So that's the only option I see. The New Day getting the victory. It doesn't make much sense for the Wyatts to win this one. The feud between Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, the culmination of a feud that's been 10 years in the making, or whatever the hell they said. 10 years is always the number that they come up with all these feuds. But if I had to go with someone, I'd pick Sami Zayn, because he's the face, he's the baby face. They already had Kevin Owens beat Sami Zayn clean on a pay-per-view, on the last pay-per-view that they wrestled in together, Money in the Bank, or the one before Money in the Bank, I think, actually, or Payback, or it might have been Payback. But whatever. Either way, Kevin Owens already got his victory on Sami Zayn, so I think Sami Zayn gets his victory back on pay-per-view. Sami Zayn has beaten Kevin Owens off of pay-per-view, but on pay-per-view, Sami Zayn has not beaten Kevin Owens, so he's going to get his win back, and Sami Zayn's going to go off and be a great babyface on Raw, and Kevin Owens is going to be as good as he is and on Raw as well. So Sami Zayn gets the victory there. That's what makes sense to me. This 6-man match between the Club and John Cena and Enzo Amore and Big Cass. Oh man, if this was a couple days ago, I would have said the club, but I see Cena winning this one because the club are no more. As we all know, Enzo and Cass are on Raw and Cena's on SmackDown. But to give those three guys momentum separately is more important than giving the club momentum because there is no club. Gallows and Anderson are on Raw and AJ's on SmackDown, and unless they pull a click thing and they start giving each other shout outs on other shows, their time together is basically done. So I actually got to see the club after the show on on Tuesday in Worcester. They were leaving the building in their car, and Gallows and Anderson they didn't look very happy, and AJ Styles was in the back seat. And he didn't look very happy either. And I got a pretty good look at them, and I got it recorded and everything, and they didn't look very happy about the results of the draft. So it looks like it's kudos for the club. John Cena, Enzo Amore, and Big Cass get the win, and hopefully that gives them a lot of momentum going forward, which they need in their respective brands. And on to the main event. Now, like I said before, this main event is very, very important in the long scheme of things. With everything that has to do with the businesses, they can't F this up because it's a big deal. Hopefully, this becomes a very close to a 5-star match. If not a 5-star match, I feel like this has the potential to be one of the best triple threat matches of all time. And they've had some great ones. The best one I can say probably ever was WrestleMania 20, as we all know, between Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and that other guy that ended up winning. But that match was probably the best. And they've had a couple good ones these last couple years. Fastlane this year in February was a great one between Roman, Dean, and Brock Lesnar. The one last year between Brock, Seth, and John Cena was great as well at the Royal Rumble a couple years ago. So they've had some great triple threat matches the last couple years. Obviously, the women's match as well this past WrestleMania between Charlotte, Becky Lynch, and Sasha. So I feel like this one could top them all because their storyline goes further than all these other storylines did. So this one could top all those matches. And those guys, Roman, like I said, Roman and Dean were in a great triple threat match with Brock. Seth was in a great triple threat match with Brock and Cena. So it's not like this is the first time they've done triple threat matches and can have a good one. So hopefully I see it. I see it. Like it's the stars are aligning perfectly. I see an unbelievable match, unbelievable storyline, and a great ending. Because in my opinion, the ending, which a lot of you are gonna hate, but I think Roman's gonna get the victory. Even though he was suspended, even though people said that he should probably be the one to get pinned because he was suspended and he broke the rules and he shouldn't be rewarded for breaking the rules. But that's exactly what you need. That's what you need. You know why? Because the heel heat that Roman Reigns will get after he wins the WWE title at Battleground will be one of the biggest deals and biggest heels in the history of this company. It will be immense. Just thinking about the heat that he will possibly get is just making my body steam right now. No homo, because it is just crazy how much I'm cringing right now. If you can't tell, I'm cringing that he's going to be so unpopular after cheating, after taking steroids, after already not being liked, to come back and win the championship against all odds for people that don't want him to win. He will be immensely booed. He will be the biggest heel in the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and they will have a great platform to go forward with. A great platform. Seth Rollins, Dean, they'll be great on their own with their feuds, with whatever they do. But having Roman as the heel champion, I don't see anything better than that. I don't. That's what I see. That's me being the greatest booker of all time. But if I had my professional opinion, Dean would keep the belt and he would stay on SmackDown with the belt. That's my professional opinion. But if they want this to be a 5-star match and be one of the most memorable matches of all time, and if they want this match to be the cornerstone for their popularity being changed. In my opinion, you need the strong heel to get taken over by a strong face. But at the end of the day, you still need that first part. You still need the very strong heel to get that strong face over to create the boom. And it happened with everyone. Without Shawn Michaels in 97, even though his back broke and it kind of derailed the momentum a little bit, without that strong DX Shawn Michaels, Stone Cold wouldn't have been as over as far as legitimacy as he was. Without The Rock in the next coming year, having Stone Cold win the title in back-to-back years is a little bit iffy, but having The Rock be the great heel champion that he was helped put him over. Without Triple H being the biggest fucking piece of crap we've ever seen as a heel champion, Batista wouldn't have been as over as he was. And I credit Triple H to that. Without Sheamus being the biggest piece of crap we've ever seen a couple months ago, Roman Reigns, the only time Roman Reigns was ever over was because we had a great heel champion. And people, to this day, hated Sheamus as champion, but honestly, he was the only guy that got Roman over. The only one. So in my opinion, he did his job perfectly. He was the only one that did his job perfectly. Triple H didn't. They still booed him at WrestleMania 32. Triple H was basically the face. Sheamus was the only guy that did his job and that got Roman over. And so you need a great heel champion to make a great face, to have a game-changing face become the champion. So I think Roman is the only guy that can do that right now. They don't have a really big heel bad guy right now. Seth Rollins is becoming popular. Dean is becoming popular. Kevin Owens is becoming popular. The only guy who is completely 100% unpopular with most of the crowd is Roman Reigns. So the other two guys, in my opinion, are tweeners. Dean Ambrose is favorably more face, but at the same time, I don't like Dean Ambrose. And I know a lot of people that don't really see him as polarizing. So, and Seth Rollins is a tweener right now. Until he gets a legitimate face turn, he's a tweener. He's a heel who is a face who is a heel. And, you can't be the big dog on top as champion being a tweener, as so eloquently put by Jim Ross and Stone Cold. So, to me, it only makes sense that Roman Reigns wins this match, and he becomes the big heel that we've all wanted, and goes on to have the Roman Empire reign as a big fat bad guy thing. And whether they add a stable with him or not, or whatever they do with him, I think that that is the precedent that they need to set to help bring a lot of eyes to the company. Because who's not gonna want to see Roman Reigns lose now that he won? This freaking cheater just won the title. What? You know how many eyes are gonna be on the product after that? Come on, guys. That's the best. To me, that's the best way you can go with it. And if they were smart, they would do the same thing. So that's my opinion. And if you don't like it, tough cookies. I guess I broke your heart. Oh man, I appreciate you guys watching again, man. Battleground is this Sunday again. I think it's, at least if anything, tune in for the main event. That part of the show is going to be must see, and hopefully we're not disappointed. This is Heartbreak. See you after Battleground. Hopefully, I'll probably do a post Battleground show. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it on Sunday night or Sunday night or Monday morning, depending on how things feel. But hopefully, my guy right here, Roman Reigns, gets his victory, and we begin a new era in WWE. Thank you for listening, guys. This is Heartbreak. This is the perfect podcast. And sorry if I broke your hearts, but that's just what I do. And I do it because I can. See you guys later.